Here's a question from Aaron. And this is a great question. It's quite a different spin on things. Aaron says, I'm a ratepayer and I'm curious about an aspect of vegetation management that I don't see covered by you, by your other stories. With the droughts we've been having over the past few years, is there an impact on the vegetation under transmission lines? I know that farmers are experimenting with no-till, biochar, and rotational cropping systems to farm for increased soil carbon. Apparently, the improved soil carbon helps farmers cope with droughts and improves the soil conditions. I see that T&D magazine has ads for environmentally smart vegetation management. Does it make sense for utilities to manage their vegetation under power lines for improved drought resilience? And would it be a good PR move to manage the vegetation and soils on the right-of-ways for improved carbon sequestration? Goes on to say, because carbon sequestration doesn't always mean trees, in many areas the soil itself is so carbon poor that it could handle significant enrichment before it starts returning some of the carbon back to the atmosphere. Well, Aaron, obviously you've been doing some studying up on carbon sequestration. And it just so happens that you got your question to the right guy. I, at one point in my career, worked in that area. So first off, let me explain to you about utility vegetation management. Utilities, you mentioned here about managing soils, and the utilities are not directly managing the soils because they're not really disturbing the soil. When it comes to maintenance, you're removing vegetation from the top, but you're not really, as I say, you're not really getting into the soil typically. And that is where practices like no-till come in. It's the cultivation, the tilling, that results in the oxidation of the carbon materials, the carbon biomass materials that are in the soil. They break down, thereby lowering the carbon content, the organic matter content in the soil, which then reduces the water holding capacity and so on. So given that we're not cultivating the area, that sort of part of carbon losses really doesn't enter into it. The carbon, the loss would be what is removed directly in the biomass, which regenerates quite quickly. The intention on power line right-of-ways is to convert the right-of-way to a power line compatible vegetation community. That's typically an early stage successional community. Let's see, there was oh, yes, and I wanted to mention, we did look at one time at right-of-ways and the carbon, soil carbon implications. As I said, because we're taking vegetation away, and this was a study I was involved in, and we found the right-of-ways did not substantially lower the carbon or organic matter content in the soil. And in fact, because wet areas are treated somewhat differently and with respect, those turned out to be areas where the soil, the natural soil carbon content was very high. And those areas typically are not supporting tall growing tree species that would interfere with power lines. So those are maintained as is, and thereby keep that organic matter in the soil. Thanks for your question, Aaron. As I said, an interesting and different look.